is a land of ancient wonder and timeless legends. It possesses examples of virtually every known type of societal division. 6 major religions: Hinduism, Islam, Sikhism, Christianity, Buddhism, and Zoroastrianism. 2 major language families, Aryan and Dravidian, with 18 official languages and innumerable dialects and tribal languages. 3 racial strains, Aryan, Dravidian, and Proto-Australoid, and over 4,000 castes. One of the most fascinating topics spawning from India's past is the story of ancient flying machines known as vimanas. In Sanskrit, vimana literally means measuring out, transversing, or having been measured out. It can refer to the palace of an emperor or supreme monarch, the adytum of a Rama temple or of any other temple, a temple or shrine of a particular form, a god's palace, Pushpaka, the flying palace of King Ravana of Lanka, a chariot of the gods, any mythical self-moving aerial car, sometimes serving as a seat or throne, sometimes self-moving and carrying its occupant through the air. Other descriptions make the vimana more like a house or palace, and one kind is said to be 7 stories high. And it can also mean any chariot or vehicle. In Vedic literature, one finds the predecessors of the flying vimanas of the Sanskrit epics. Vimanas were the flying chariots employed by various gods. The Vedas are considered the earliest literary record of Indo-Aryan civilization and the most sacred books of India. They are the original scriptures of Hindu teachings and contain spiritual knowledge encompassing all aspects of life. Vedic literature is the highest religious authority for all sections of Hindus and for mankind in general. The Ramayana is one of the 2 epic Hindu poems, the other being the Mahabharata. The Ramayana describes a love story between Rama, an ancient king, and Sita, who is captured by Ravan, the king of Ceylon. Rama lays siege to Ceylon and wins back Sita. In the Ramayana, the Pushpaka vimana of Ravana is described as follows. The Pushpaka vimana that resembles the sun and belongs to my brother was brought by the powerful Ravana. That aerial and excellent vimana going everywhere at will. That chariot resembling a bright cloud in the sky. And the king got in, and the excellent chariot at the command of the Ragira rose up into the higher atmosphere. It is the first flying vimana mentioned in existing Hindu mythology text. The Mahabharata is the other major Sanskrit epic of ancient India. The Mahabharata is an important source of information on the development of Hinduism. It is regarded by Hindus as both a text about Dharma and their history. It is worth noting that the core Mahabharata actually does not contain mention of vimanas. However, there is a wealth of description in the additions thereafter. A large quantity of these descriptions is in the context of wars between gods. Incredibly, there are detailed descriptions of advanced technologies beyond simple flying machines, spanning from cloaking devices to nuclear weaponry. The vimana had all necessary equipment. It could not be conquered by the gods or demons, and it radiated light and reverberated with a deep rumbling sound. Its beauty captivated the minds of all who beheld it. Vishvakarma, the lord of its design and construction, had created it by the powers of his austerities, and its outline, like that of the sun, could not be easily delineated. And he also gave unto Arjuna a car furnished with celestial weapons whose banner bore a large ape, and its splendor, like that of the sun, was so great that no one could gaze at it. It was the very car riding upon which the Lord Soma had vanquished the Danavas. Resplendent with beauty, it looked like an evening cloud reflecting the effulgence of the setting sun. Bhima flew along in his car, resplendent as the sun and loud as thunder. The flying chariot shone like a flame in the night sky of summer. It swept by like a comet. It was as if 2 suns were shining. Then the chariot rose up, and all the heavens brightened. And on this sun-like, divine, wonderful chariot, the wise discipline of Kuru fell joyously upward. When becoming invisible to the mortals who walked the earth, he saw wondrous airborne chariots by the thousands. And the celebrated Arjuna, having passed through successive regions of the heavens, at last beheld the city of Indra. And there he beheld celestial cars by thousands stationed in their respective places, and capable of going everywhere at will, and he saw tens of thousands of such cars moving in every direction. And thereupon the best of cars became still more dazzling with its splendor, and was incapable of being looked at by created beings, as the midday sun surrounded by 1,000 rays. And Achyuta, that tiger among men, riding with the two sons of Pandu upon that celestial car, coming out of Girivraja, stopped for some time on a level plain outside of town. Ashoka Maurya, also known as Ashoka the Great, was an Indian emperor of the Maurya dynasty who ruled almost all of the Indian subcontinent from circa 269 BCE to 232 BCE. Ashoka started the secret society of the Nine Unknown Men, comprised of great Indian scientists. According to the French occult author Louis Jacoliot, Ashoka's scientists experimented with techniques that were supposed to be unknown 2,000 years ago. The Society of the Nine studied the liberation of energy, sterilization by radiation, and psychological warfare, all subjects that our modern civilization have discovered just recently. Each of the 9 members possessed a book that was constantly rewritten, updated, and contained detailed accounts of a certain scientific subject. Book 6 focused on the secrets of gravitation. Was this some sort of ancient knowledge gained from an extraterrestrial source? The Samarangana Sutrahara is a work on classical Indian architecture and warfare written by King Bhoj of Bihar. English translations of this particular work seem to have purposely omitted some of the most detailed references to Vimanas. R. Cedric Leonard, Ph.D., has offered up the following fascinating translation. Strong and durable must the yantra's body be made, of light material and having wings joined smoothly with invisible seams. It can carry passengers, it can be made small and compact, it can move in silence. If sound is to be used successfully, there must be great flexibility in the driving mechanism, and all must be put together flawlessly. In order for it to accomplish its intended purpose, it must be extremely durable, it must be well covered in, it must not become too hot, too stiff, nor too soft, and its sharp-pointed battering ram must also be indestructible. Indeed, the machine's main qualities, which are remembered by one and all, include unending motion, which is to say perpetual motion. Smoothness is one of the machine's supreme qualities, thus, the workings of the machine must be versatile, complete, not given to expansion, never complaining, and always applicable to the task. At this point, the text becomes most interesting, but also the most difficult. It is evident that essential elements in the propulsion system are deliberately vague or completely left out. The reason for this is explained later in the text. The viewer can see why the following has never appeared in any of the current English translations. At the critical time, the beam of fire must be released, which will make the action possible. The time beam expands, accompanied by the thunder of the expanding medium. This resultant expansion performs work like an elephant in an endless cycle. Further along in the text is a paragraph which mentions using wood as a potential building material in the construction of one of these amazing machines. Then, it immediately launches into a description of a propulsion system using a combustible fuel similar to gasoline. The manufacturing of a conquering yantra is greatly to be desired, using lightweight wood to build a great air-going machine of a strong-bodied type. In the central container is the liquid consumed by the engine, which gradually burns away during complete combustion. Immediately following is a list of the possible motions and maneuvers available to the pilot. Several of these would have been deemed incredible by modern aircraft engineers until the introduction of the hovercraft and the more recent British aircraft commonly known as the Harrier. Fully renowned are the techniques for mastering the following motions: vertical ascent, vertical descent, forwards, backwards, normal ascent, normal descent, slanting, progressing over long distances through proper adjustment of the working parts. Its air-rending sound and roaring thunder can easily drown out the trumpeting of an elephant in panic, but it can also be moved by musical tones. Shining in every direction, their machine could travel wherever the imagination dictated. From their great height, they saw stimulating dances, drama plays, and pristine ritualistic ceremonies. Their yantra gained renown among royal dynasties in various nations. In such a manner the high-souled ones flew, while the lower classes walked. All those friends succeeded in their much-deserved acquisition of a yantra by means of which human beings can fly in the air, and non-earthling, celestial beings can come down to mortals when visiting the earth. Certain of the aircraft described seemed to be winged like a modern airplane, but such a craft could not go backwards, nor could it ascend or descend vertically. The term dual-winged without doubt appears in the following text in conjunction with some sort of air or jet propulsion. Thus, inside one must place the mercury engine, and properly mounted beneath it the iron heating apparatus. Men thusly set the dual-winged, driving whirlwind in motion, and the concealed pilot by means of the mercury power may travel a great distance in the sky. Then what follows is the description of a much larger, more complex vimana, which is powered by 4 mercury engines. An extremely swift and nimble vimana can be built as large as the temple of the god in motion. Into the interior structure, 4 strong mercury containers must be installed. When these have been heated by a controlled fire from iron containers, the flying machine develops thunder power through the mercury, becoming a highly desirable yantra. Moreover, if this iron engine with properly welded joints be filled with fluid, when ascending or descending over land, it generates power with the roar of a lion. The machine's construction and operating details are not publicly disclosed, for if their motivative power be made known publicly to others, giving out results described elsewhere, elements of these machines could be wrongly used. Among the ancient texts from India, the Mahabharata in particular describes potential atomic conflicts in great detail. Quote, wounded by the flight of deadly accurate iron missiles, the Ashura Vimana fell broken to the earth. Matali swiftly descended earthward as in a steep dive on our divinely effulgent car, destroying that blazing illusion of Gatotkacha and piercing right through his breast that resplendent dart soared aloft in the night. And having vanquished his foe, Krishna, furnished with weapons and unwounded and accompanied by the kings, came out of Girivraja riding on that celestial car. Upon that car Krishna now came out of the hill fort, possessed of the splendor of heated gold and decked with rows of jingling bells, always slaughtering the foe against whom he was driven. It was the very car riding upon which Indra had slain 99 Ashuras of old. We beheld in the sky what appeared to us to be a mass of scarlet cloud resembling the fierce flames of a blazing fire. From that mass many blazing missiles flashed, and tremendous roars like the noise of 1,000 drums beaten at once. And from it fell many weapons winged with gold, and thousands of thunderbolts with loud explosions, and many hundreds of fiery wheels. Loud became the uproar of falling horses, slain by these missiles, and of mighty elephants struck by the explosions. Those terrible Rakshasas had the shape of large mounds stationed in the sky. The Bhagavata Purana is all about the activities of the Hindu god Vishnu in various incarnations, and particularly as Krishna. It includes an account of a war between the evil king Salva and his attempt to destroy the city of Krishna called Dwarka. In the process, it describes weapons which have all the earmarks of modern rocketry and aerial vehicles which have capabilities far beyond conventional aircraft. It is common for most Hindu translators to render the Sanskrit Vimana as airplane. But since the aerial vehicles described in this document move through the air using neither wings nor conventional engines, the Sanskrit term is left intact so the viewer will know that these are not ordinary aircraft. Likewise, the Sanskrit term usually translated as arrow is easily seen on occasion as some sort of high-tech missile. Therefore, the use of the term shaft or missile is more applicable. Lord Krishna's home base is the legendary city known as Dwarka. His mortal enemy, King Salva, requested an extremely high-tech aerial vehicle by which he might destroy the city of Dwarka and kill his hated enemy, Lord Krishna. The accomplished architect/engineer Mayadevana fulfilled Salva's request. The details can be found in the following Sanskrit text. Salva chose a Vimana that could not be destroyed by Devas, Asuras, humans, Gandharvas, Uragas, nor Rakshasas, that could travel anywhere he wished to go, and that would terrify the Varishnis. Lord Shiva said, "So be it." On his order, Mayadevana, who conquers his enemies' cities, constructed a flying vehicle made of iron named Sobha, and presented it to Salva. Delighted with his new wonderful and powerful airship, the wicked King Salva gathers his army about him and heads for the city of Krishna to do battle. This unassailable vehicle was filled with darkness and could go anywhere. Upon obtaining it, Salva, remembering the Varishnis' enmity toward him, proceeded to the city of Dwarka. Salva besieged the city with a large army. O best of the Bharatas, decimating the outlying parks and gardens, the mansions along with their observatories, towering gateways and surrounding walls, and also the public recreational areas. However, fortunes turn, and in short order King Salva's forces are decimated. Infuriated, King Salva makes use of his newly acquired aerial contrivance to attack the city with every means at his disposal. From his excellent Vimana, he threw down a torrent of projectiles. A fierce vortex arose and blanketed the entire area with billowing dust. At this point, Lord Krishna suddenly appears in his shining chariot to confront King Salva in battle. When Salva saw Krishna's chariot on the battlefield, he thereupon released a great and powerful weapon which flew through the sky with a roaring sound like a great meteor. The text describes it as being so bright that it literally lit up the entire sky. This sounds a lot like a modern rocket. As Krishna began his counterattack, Salva engages the special powers of his Vimana in an all-out effort to avoid destruction. A modern translation provides us with the graphic details. The airplane occupied by Salva was very mysterious. It was so extraordinary that sometimes many airplanes would appear to be in the sky, and sometimes there were apparently none. Sometimes the plane was visible and sometimes not visible, and the warriors of the Yadu dynasty were puzzled about the whereabouts of the peculiar airplane. Sometimes they would see the airplane on the ground, sometimes flying in the sky, sometimes resting on the peak of a hill, and sometimes floating on the water. The wonderful airplane flew in the sky like a whirling firebrand. It was not steady even for a moment. The last sentence, containing the statement of Salva's celestial vehicle looking like a, quote, whirling firebrand, unquote, should cause one to look twice at the so-called wheels of Ezekiel as described in the Hebrew Bible. The similarities are striking. Did Ezekiel encounter 4 ancient Vimanas on several occasions during his captivity in Babylonia? Lord Krishna first destroyed King Salva's great weapon by discharging his own missile described as being bright as the sun in the sky. As mentioned earlier, these sound more like high-tech missiles rather than what we would think of as ordinary arrows. He then disabled Salva's Vimana completely by releasing an overwhelming shower of destructive missiles, and eventually Salva's wondrous Vimana burst into pieces and fell into the sea. Salva miraculously escapes the doomed Vimana at the last minute and on foot rushes vehemently at his hated enemy. The latter, shining like the sun rising over the mountains, ushers forth the final blow by utilizing a brilliant discus. Thus, after a tremendously high-tech battle, the evil King Salva and his flying machine are finally brought to an ignominious end. Historian Kesari Mohan Ganguly says that Indian sacred writings are full of such descriptions which sound like an atomic blast as experienced in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He says references mention fighting sky chariots and final weapons. An ancient battle is described in the Drona Parva, a section of the Mahabharata. Quote, "The passage tells of combat where explosions of final weapons decimate entire armies, causing crowds of warriors with steeds and elephants and weapons to be carried away as if they were dry leaves of trees," says Ganguly. Consider these verses from the ancient Mahabharata. A single projectile charged with all the power of the universe. An incandescent column of smoke and flame as bright as the 1,000 suns rose in all its splendor. A perpendicular explosion with its billowing smoke clouds. The cloud of smoke rising after its first explosion formed into expanding round circles like the opening of giant parasols. It was an unknown weapon, an iron thunderbolt, a gigantic messenger of death which reduced to ashes the entire race of the Varishnis and the Ondakas. The corpses were so burned as to be unrecognizable. The hair and nails fell out. Pottery broke without apparent cause, and the birds turned white. After a few hours, all foodstuffs were infected. To escape from this fire, the soldiers threw themselves in streams to wash themselves and their equipment. Until the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, modern mankind could not imagine any weapon as horrible and devastating as those described in the ancient Indian text. Yet they very accurately described the effects of an atomic explosion. Radioactive poisoning will make hair and nails fall out, and immersing oneself in water gives some respite, though it's not a cure. When excavations of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro reached the street level, they discovered skeletons scattered about the cities, many holding hands and sprawling in the streets as if some instant, horrible doom had taken place. Excavations down to the street level revealed 44 scattered skeletons, as if some doom had come so suddenly they could not get to their houses. All the skeletons were flattened to the ground. A father, mother, and child were found flattened in the street, face down and still holding hands. And these skeletons are thousands of years old, even by traditional archaeological standards. What could cause such a thing? Why did the bodies not decay or get eaten by wild animals? Furthermore, there is no apparent cause of a physically violent death. However, these skeletons are among the most radioactive ever found, on par with those at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. At one site, Soviet scholars found a skeleton which had a radioactive level 50 times greater than normal. Other cities have been found in northern India that show indications of explosions of great magnitude. One such city, found between the Ganges and the mountains of Raj Mahal, seems to have been subjected to intense heat. Huge masses of walls and foundations of the ancient city are fused together, literally vitrified. And since there is no indication of a volcanic eruption at Mohenjo-Daro or at the other cities, the intense heat to melt clay vessels can only be explained by an atomic blast or some other unknown weapon. The cities were wiped out entirely. What was found at the site of Mohenjo-Daro corresponds exactly to Nagasaki. There was an epicenter about 50 yards wide where everything was crystallized, fused, or melted. 60 yards from the center, the bricks are melted on one side, indicating a blast. The horrible, mysterious event of 4,000 years ago that leveled Mohenjo-Daro was recorded in the Mahabharata, which has been guarded by holy men for centuries. White, hot smoke that was 1,000 times brighter than the sun rose in infinite brilliance and reduced the city to ashes, the account reads. Water boiled. Horses and war chariots were burned by the thousands. The corpses of the fallen were mutilated by the terrible heat so that they no longer looked like human beings. The description concludes, "It was a terrible sight to see. Never before have we seen such a ghastly weapon." In order to understand why the theory of an ancient nuclear war is much more than mere speculation, it is worthwhile to understand the process of vitrification. Vitrification is the process by which sand, or more accurately, silica, is superheated and then cooled, which results in glass transition. It's the way all glass is made in basic terms, though there's a difference between deliberately fired glass for manufacturing and vitrified sand. The latter type of glass consists of three categories: fulgurite, which is a glass created via lightning strikes; tekite, which is formed from the heat generated by meteor strikes; and trinitite, which is the glass that results from nuclear detonations. The only real difference between those three categories of vitrified sand is the different heat sources that make them. Other than a tendency for trinitite to be radioactive, samples of each are pretty much the same compositionally. Silicon dioxide, which is the most common element in sand around the world, melts at roughly 1700 degrees Celsius, so any of those methods can get the job done. But if there were a competition, the clear winner would be a nuclear detonation. The heat generated through a nuclear blast can be greater than 10 million kelvins, or 9,999,726.85 degrees Celsius. By comparison, the surface of the sun is only 5,778 kelvins. So, the Mohenjo-Daro vitrified ruins were made by one of three potential events, it seems. A series of major lightning strikes, a meteor strike, or a nuclear detonation. The viewer can determine which makes the most sense to you. There is additional evidence that the Rama Empire was devastated by nuclear detonation. The Indus Valley is now the Thar Desert, and the site of the radioactive ash found west of Jodhpur is near there. A heavy layer of radioactive ash in Rajasthan, India, covers a 3 square mile area 10 miles west of Jodhpur. Scientists are investigating the site where a housing development was being built. For some time, it has been established that there is a very high rate of birth defects and cancer in the area under construction. The levels of radiation there have registered so high on investigators' gauges that the Indian government has now cordoned off the region. Another curious sign of an ancient nuclear war in India is a giant crater near Bombay. The nearly circular 2,154-meter diameter Lonar crater, located 400 kilometers northeast of Mumbai and aged at less than 50,000 years old, could be related to nuclear warfare of antiquity. No trace of any meteoric material has been found at the site or in the vicinity, and this is the world's only known impact crater in basalt. As we contemplate the accounts from the ancient text, the archive believes it is no great leap in logic to surmise that our ancestors were describing ancient technology well beyond human capability at the time. It also seems clear that some of this technology was atomic-based and carried with it immense destructive capacity. Furthermore, modern scientific findings of vitrification and radioactivity have left most modern scholars baffled. One of their best guesses to explain these scientific findings is that our ancestors built really hot bonfires. Needless to say, the archive will not even address that absurdity.